I remember the way the condensation dripped down my wine glass. Slow, heavy, like a tear that didn't have the courage to fall. Across the table, my sister Alexis was glowing. That's the word people use, isn't it? Glowing. But to me she looked like a forest fire, beautiful from a distance, but ready to turn everything I loved into ash. Matthew, my husband of 10 years, sat next to her. Not next to me. He was helping her cut her steak. Because apparently at 24, my sister still hadn't mastered the use of a knife. Then, she said it. Mary. Matthew. I'm pregnant again. The air left my lungs. I looked at Matthew. He didn't look shocked. He looked proud. He reached over and squeezed her hand. My hand, the one with the $10,000 diamond he bought me for our anniversary, felt cold, heavy, dead. Before I tell you how I handled the blood-curdling betrayal that followed, look at your hand. If you're the kind of person who would let a sister drown in her own lies, then keep scrolling. But if you value loyalty, if you've ever been the one left holding the pieces while others played games, subscribe right now. Don't let the betrayers win. And if you're too weak to hit that button, enter the comments section and lament. Tell me exactly why you won't subscribe and why you think loyalty doesn't matter anymore. I'll be waiting. I spent 3 years raising Alexis's first son, Leo. I changed his diapers. I stayed up during his fevers while Alexis recovered from the stress of being a single mom. I thought I was being a good sister. I thought Matthew was being a supportive brother-in-law. But as I looked at the way Matthew looked at Alexis's stomach, a memory clicked. A weekend business trip 9 weeks ago. Alexis's spa retreat the same weekend. The math didn't just add up. Isn't that strange? You'd think that finding out your life is a carefully constructed theater and you're the only one not in on the script would make you want to burn the house down. But as I sat there in the office, the leather chair feeling like ice against my skin, I felt a strange, cold clarity. The receipt in my hand was small, just a slip of thermal paper, but it weighed more than the entire world. Matthew. My husband. The man who promised to protect me. Alexis. My sister. The girl I protected from the world when our parents died. They hadn't just betrayed me. They had used my grief, my love, and my home to build a nest for their lies. I heard the floorboard creak outside the office door. I didn't move. I didn't hide the paper. My heart was hammering against my ribs like a bird in a cage, but my hands were perfectly still. The door pushed open. Matthew stood there, his silk shirt unbuttoned at the collar. He looked like the hero of a romance novel, the kind of man women envy me for having. He looked at me, then at the safe. Mary? What are you doing up? It's 3 in the morning. I looked at him, really looked at him. I looked at the way he leaned against the doorframe, so casual, so comfortable in a house bought with my family's money. I couldn't sleep, I said. My voice was steady. It sounded like someone else was speaking. I was just checking on some documents. For the guest suite. If Alexis is moving in, we need to make sure the insurance covers another occupant. Matthew's eyes flickered. Just for a second. A tiny spark of relief. He thought I was still the caregiver Mary. The problem solver Mary. You're always thinking of everyone else, honey, he said, walking over to press a kiss to the top of my head. I felt my skin crawl. It took every ounce of my will not to recoil. His lips felt like a brand. I could smell it on him, the scent of Alexis's perfume. Midnight jasmine. She'd been wearing it at dinner. He had been in her room. Already. Before the boxes were even packed. Go to bed, he whispered. I'll handle the heavy lifting tomorrow. Oh, you have no idea what kind of heavy lifting is coming, Matthew. The next morning, the invasion began. That's what it was. An invasion. Alexis didn't just bring suitcases. She brought a whirlwind of chaos. She swept into my New York apartment with 3-year-old Leo in tow, the boy I had spent every weekend raising while she found herself at retreats. Mary. Can you help me with the stroller? My back is just, with the new pregnancy. I'm so fragile. Alexis chirped. She handed me the dirty stroller without even looking at me. She walked straight to the guest suite, the one I had decorated with hand-painted wallpaper, and started barking orders at the movers. I looked down at Leo. He was holding a stuffed bear I'd bought him for his birthday. He looked at me with Matthew's eyes. Exactly Matthew's eyes. How had I been so blind? I used to tell people he looked like our father. I lied to myself to protect her reputation. I built the blindfold myself and handed them the cloth. Auntie Mary? Leo tugged at my skirt. Where's Daddy? The world stopped spinning. I felt the air grow thin. I knelt down so I was eye level with him. My voice was a ghost. What did you call him, Leo? Alexis appeared in the doorway of the guest suite, her face pale. She let out a high-pitched, fake laugh. Oh, you know how kids are, she said, rushing over to scoop Leo up. He's been watching those cartoons where everyone has a daddy. He just gets confused because Matthew is the only male figure in his life. Right, Matthew? Matthew was coming up the stairs with a crate of her shoes. He didn't even flinch, right? Poor kid just needs some stability. That's why we're here, right, Mary? I stood up slowly. I brushed off my skirt. Right, I said. Stability. Weeks passed. The apartment, once my sanctuary of minimalist design and quiet mornings, became a battleground of noise and entitlement. Alexis didn't just live there, she colonized it. My expensive organic groceries? Eaten. My silk throws? Covered in Leo's juice stains. My husband? Matthew was working late more than ever. But the hidden cameras I'd installed in the guest suite, small, pinhole lenses hidden in the smoke detectors, told a different story. I spent my nights in the master bedroom, the door locked, watching the feed on my tablet. I watched my husband sit on the edge of my sister's bed. I watched them laugh about me. She actually thinks I'm stressed about the business. Matthew whispered on the screen, his voice tinny through the speakers. She's so busy playing Martha Stewart that she doesn't notice the transfers. Alexis leaned back against the pillows, rubbing her growing stomach. She's a martyr, Maddie. Martyrs love to suffer. It makes them feel important. Just keep her busy with Leo, and she'll never look at the books. Martyr. That's what they thought I was. But a martyr dies for a cause. I wasn't planning on dying. I opened my laptop. I wasn't looking at Martha Stewart recipes. I was looking at the corporate structure of Matthew's firm. He thought he was smart, moving money from our joint account to a consulting firm. What he didn't know was that I had hired my own consultant, a forensic accountant with a grudge against cheaters. Days pass. I whispered to the empty room. But the bill is getting higher. One Tuesday, while Alexis was out getting a prenatal massage on my credit card, I decided to take Leo to the park. It was a cold New York afternoon. The wind bit at my face. As I watched him play, a woman sat down next to me. She looked tired, clutching a coffee cup like a lifeline. First time? She asked, nodding at Leo. I'm his aunt, I said. The word felt like ash in my mouth. He's the image of his father, she remarked. Those eyes. Distinctive. There's a man who walks a golden retriever in my building who has those exact eyes. Same jawline, too. My heart stopped. A man in your building? Yeah. Over on 82nd. He's a lawyer, I think. Nice guy, but always looks like he's hiding something. Matthew didn't live on 82nd, but he had an office there. A private satellite office he claimed was for high-stakes litigation. I looked at Leo. Then at the woman. What color is the dog? I asked. Golden, she said. Beautiful thing. He calls it Justice. Justice. Matthew had a dog named Justice at a secret apartment on 82nd Street. I didn't take Leo home immediately. I took a cab to 82nd Street. I sat in the back of the car, watching the numbers climb. I told myself I was being paranoid. I told myself there were thousands of men with distinctive eyes in New York. But when the cab pulled up, I saw him. Matthew. He wasn't at the office. He was coming out of a brownstone, holding a leash. A golden retriever leaped at his side. He looked happy. He looked free. And then, the door of the brownstone opened again. A woman walked out. It was a woman I had never seen before. She was tall, professional, and she kissed Matthew with a familiarity that made my stomach turn. I sat in the shadows of the cab, my phone out, recording the whole thing. Matthew wasn't just cheating on me with my sister. He was cheating on my sister with someone else. The house of cards didn't just have a crack. It was built on a sinkhole. And I was the only one with the power to pull the trigger. I sat in the back of that yellow cab for a long time after Matthew and that woman went back inside. The meter was ticking. It sounded like a countdown. The driver looked at me in the rearview mirror, his eyes filled with a pity I couldn't stomach. You okay, lady? You want me to keep the heat on? I'm fine, I whispered. But I wasn't. My soul felt like it had been put through a paper shredder. I looked at the video on my phone. My husband. My sister. And now, this stranger. Matthew wasn't just a cheater. He was a collector of lives. He had his official life with me, the wealth, the social standing, the stability. He had his secret family with Alexis, the thrill, the ego boost of being a savior. And he had this third life on 82nd Street. He didn't love any of us. He loved the game. He loved seeing how many plates he could keep spinning before they all came crashing down on our heads. But as I watched them through the glass, a realization hit me that was colder than the New York winter. Alexis didn't know. My smug, entitlement-driven sister thought she was the other woman who had finally won. She thought she was the one who had stolen the king from the queen. She had no idea she was just another piece on the board. I returned to the apartment. It was 5 o'clock. The smell of burnt garlic filled the air. Alexis had tried to cook. "Where have you been?" she snapped as I walked through the door with Leo. She was lounging on my Italian leather sofa, her feet up on the coffee table. Leo was supposed to have his nap an hour ago. You know how cranky he gets. I looked at her. I looked at the curve of her stomach, the second child she was carrying for a man who was currently kissing a lawyer on 82nd Street. I took a detour, Alexis. I wanted to see some real estate. Alexis stiffened. Real estate? Why? We're perfectly fine here. Are we? I walked over to the sideboard and poured myself a glass of water. My hand was steady now. The heartbreak was still there, a dull ache in my chest, but the anger was becoming a diamond. Hard, sharp, unbreakable. I was thinking about the future. About where you'll go once the baby is born. Matthew can't support 2 households forever on his salary, can he? Alexis let out a sharp, mocking laugh. Oh, Mary. You're so naive. Matthew's salary is just the tip of the iceberg. He's a partner. He has investments you don't even know about. I know about them now, sister. I thought. I know exactly which accounts he's been draining to pay for your spa days and his lawyer friend's justice dog. I'm sure he does, I said aloud. I just hope those investments are secure. That night, the house was silent, but the air was thick with the things left unsaid. I waited until I heard the heavy, rhythmic snoring of Matthew next to me. He slept so soundly. How could a man with so many secrets sleep like a baby? I slipped out of bed and went to his bedside table. I took his phone. I opened his messages. I bypassed the threads with me. I bypassed the threads with Alexis. Those were full of "I love you" and "soon we won't have to hide." I looked for the name Justice. Nothing. I looked for 82nd Street. Nothing. Then I saw a contact listed only as the firm associate. I opened it. "The paperwork for the trust is ready," the message read. "If we move the final $200K this week, the Mary account will be at the minimum threshold. She won't notice until the quarterly audit. By then, the house in the Hamptons will be in my name and we can start our real life. No more sisters. No more drama. Just us." He wasn't planning on leaving me for Alexis. He was planning on leaving both of us. He was using my money to fund a life with a third woman, while Alexis was being used as a distraction to keep me occupied. He wanted me to raise his children so he could be free to run away with the real love of his life. I felt a sob rise in my throat, but I choked it back. I took screenshots of every message. I recorded the bank transfer history. I sent it all to a secure, encrypted cloud drive. The next morning, I was different. The Mary who cared about organic kale and matching curtains was gone. The Mary who worried about her sister's fragile state was dead. I made breakfast. I smiled at Matthew. I even brushed a stray hair off his shoulder before he left for work. "Have a productive day, darling," I said. "Always do, Mary," he replied, giving me that winning smile that used to make my knees weak. Now, it just made me want to vomit. As soon as the elevator door closed, I turned to Alexis. She was sitting at the kitchen island, scrolling through a luxury baby boutique website on her iPad. "Alexis," I said, my voice as cold as a morgue. "I need you to do me a favor." She didn't even look up. "If it involves Leo's laundry, I'm busy." "No," I said, leaning over the counter until I was inches from her face. "I need you to tell me the truth. When did you and Matthew start planning to take my money?" The iPad slipped from her hands. It hit the granite with a loud clack. What? What are you talking about? She stammered, her face turning a sickly shade of gray. I know, Alexis. I know about Leo. I know about the new baby. And I know about the consulting fees Matthew has been paying you. She tried to rally. She tried to put on that mask of sisterly indignation. Mary, you're being paranoid. You're stressed. Matthew loves you, he's just being helpful to me because I'm family. Stop, I whispered. I pulled out my phone and played the video from 82nd Street. I watched her eyes. I watched the confusion, then the recognition, then the absolute, soul-crushing realization. Who is that? Alexis breathed, her voice trembling. That, I said, is the woman Matthew is actually leaving me for. He's using my money to build a life with her. He's using you to keep me distracted so I don't check the accounts. You aren't his partner, Alexis, you're his decoy. The silence in the kitchen was deafening. I watched my sister, the woman who had stolen my husband, the woman who had lived in my house and eaten my food while mocking me behind my back, crumble. She started to cry. Not the fake, manipulative tears she used to get her way. These were real. The tears of a woman who realized she had sold her soul for a lie. He said he loved me, she sobbed. He said as soon as the baby was born, we'd tell you together. He said we'd be a family. You were a family, Alexis, I said, feeling no pity. A family of thieves. But the thing about thieves is, they eventually steal from each other. She looked up at me, her mascara running down her face. What are we going to do? We. She still thought there was a we. I know what I'm going to do, I said. And if you want to survive what's coming, you're going to do exactly what I tell you. I handed her a pen and a piece of paper. Write down every date, every location, and every dollar he ever gave you. Give me the ammunition to destroy him, Alexis. Or I'll make sure the police are the ones asking you about the embezzlement. She hesitated. Just for a second. Then, she started to write. As I watched her, I had turned my enemy into my weapon. But the real war, the one that would end in the ruins of Matthew's empire, that was only just beginning. I watched the top of my sister's head as she wrote. Her hair, once so perfectly styled with my expensive salon products, looked limp. Every few minutes, a tear would hit the paper, smearing the ink of Matthew's crimes. I should have felt a sense of victory. I had broken her. I had stripped away the delusion she had used to justify her betrayal. But as I stood in my designer kitchen, looking at the wreckage of my family, all I felt was empty. Have you ever realized that your entire history was a lie? Every anniversary dinner, every I love you whispered in the dark, every holiday photo, they weren't memories. They were props. I looked at a photo on the mantel. It was from 2 years ago. Matthew and I in Aspen. He was holding me close, laughing into my ear. At the time, I thought I was the luckiest woman in the world. Now, all I could think about was who was taking the picture. It was Alexis. She had been there the whole time, watching us, waiting for her turn. I'm done, Alexis whispered. She pushed the paper toward me. I picked it up. It was a roadmap of a 3-year affair. Hotel rooms in Brooklyn. A secret bank account under a shell company called Lexington Assets. The exact moment she told him about Leo. He told me you couldn't have children, Alexis said, her voice small and hollow. He said you were cold. That you cared more about your career than a family. He said I was the only one who truly understood him. I felt a sharp sting in my eyes. I hadn't told anyone, not even her, about the 3 miscarriages I'd suffered in the early years of our marriage. Matthew had held me while I cried. He had told me it didn't matter, that I was enough for him. And then he went to her and used my deepest trauma as a weapon to get into her bed. I'm not cold, Alexis, I said, my voice trembling for the first time. I was mourning. And while I was mourning, you were celebrating. She looked away, unable to meet my eyes. What happens now? Are you going to call the police? Not yet, I said, folding the list and tucking it into my pocket. If I call the police now, Matthew's lawyers will tie this up for years. He'll use the company's money to disappear. No. I want him to think he's winning. I want him to move every single dollar into that trust for his new woman. Why? I leaned in, my shadow falling over her. Because I'm going to make sure that trust is legally tied to your children. I'm going to make sure that by the time he tries to leave us both, he has nothing left to give her. And you're going to help me. I went back to being the perfect Mary. I cooked Matthew's favorite meals. I laughed at his jokes. I even offered to take Alexis shopping for baby clothes. Matthew was ecstatic. He thought he had achieved the impossible, a wife who accepted his mistress and his secret child without a fight. He became careless. He started leaving his laptop open. He started taking calls from 82nd Street in the hallway, thinking I was too busy with Leo to notice. But every night, when the house was still, I was in the office. I was working with my forensic accountant, Sarah. We were tracing the flow of money like hunters following a blood trail. He's smart, Mary. Sarah told me over a secure line. He's using a technique called layering. He moves the money through 3 different accounts before it hits the trust. But he made one mistake. What? I asked, my heart racing. He used your digital signature to authorize the transfers. He thought it would protect him that if he got caught, he could say you were the one moving the money. But since I can prove the IP address of those transfers matches his private office on 82nd Street, it's not just embezzlement anymore. It's identity theft. It's a felony. A felony. In the eyes of the law, Matthew wasn't just a cheating husband. He was a predator. I walked into the guest suite that evening. Alexis was sitting on the edge of the bed, staring at her son while he slept. He's getting his molars in, she said without looking up. He's been fussy all day. I know, I said. I bought him some teething gel. I sat down next to her. For a moment, we weren't the wife and the mistress. We were just 2 sisters in a room built on lies. Do you ever wonder, I started, what our parents would say if they saw us now? Alexis let out a dry, hacking sob. They'd be ashamed of me. I know that. I was always the wild one. You were the one who did everything right. I wanted something that was yours, Mary. Just once. I wanted to feel like I was the one people looked at. And how does it feel? I asked quietly. She looked at the walls of the room, the hand-painted wallpaper, the luxury furniture, the gilded cage. It feels like I'm drowning, she said. And the only person holding a life jacket is the woman I tried to sink. I looked at her, and for the first time in weeks, the anger faded into a dull, heavy pity. She was a villain, yes. But she was also a victim of the same man. Keep your head above water, Alexis, I said, standing up. The storm is almost here. I walked back to my bedroom and found Matthew standing by my dresser. He was holding my jewelry box, the one where I kept my mother's vintage pearls. Mary, he said, his voice smooth as silk. I was thinking, with the new baby coming, maybe we should sell some of these older pieces? Invest the money into a college fund for the kids. It's what your mother would have wanted, right? I stared at him. He wasn't just stealing my future. He was trying to pawn my past to pay for his escape with another woman. I smiled. A slow, terrifyingly calm smile. That's a wonderful idea, Matthew. In fact, why don't we take everything to the appraiser tomorrow? He didn't know that the appraiser I had booked was actually a private investigator. The next morning, the air in the apartment felt different. It was thick, like the moments before a lightning strike. Matthew was actually humming as he packed my mother's pearls and my grandmother's diamond brooch into a small velvet-lined case. He thought he was being so smooth. He thought he was liquidating the last of my emotional ties to this world so he could fund his exit. I've got a guy, Matthew said, checking his reflection in the hallway mirror. Top-tier appraiser. He'll give us the best market value, no questions asked. We'll have the cash in the trust by Monday. No questions asked. I repeated, my voice a flat line. That sounds perfect, Matthew. Exactly what we need. What he didn't know was that his guy had been visited by my guy the night before. We took the car down to the Diamond District. Matthew sat in the back with me, his hand resting on my knee in a display of affection that felt like a snake coiling around my leg. You're being so strong about this, Mary, he whispered. I know how much these pieces mean to you. But think of the legacy we're building for Leo and the new one. I looked out the window at the blurred gray buildings. Oh, I'm thinking about the legacy, Matthew. I'm thinking about exactly what everyone is going to inherit. We arrived at a small, discreet office on the 12th floor. The man behind the desk was named Elias. To Matthew, he was a crooked appraiser who took a 10% cut to keep things off the books. To me, he was a man whose gambling debts had been bought out by my forensic accountant 2 days ago. He belonged to me now. Mr. and Mrs. Sterling, Elias said, nodding. Let's see what we have. Matthew laid the jewelry out like a hunter displaying his kill. Elias picked up the pearls. He turned them over under the loupe. Beautiful, Elias muttered. Then, he looked at Matthew. But I'm afraid there's a problem with the title on these, Mr. Sterling. Matthew's smile faltered. Title? It's family jewelry. There is no title. Actually, I interrupted, my voice as cold as the air conditioning in the room. I had them placed in a specific family trust years ago. Didn't I mention that, honey? They can't be sold without a secondary signature from the trust manager. Matthew laughed, a nervous, jagged sound. Well, I'm the co-manager of your assets, Mary. I'll just sign off. No, Elias said, sliding a document across the desk. The trust manager was changed 6 months ago. To a Miss Alexis Sterling. I watched Matthew's face. It was like watching a building collapse in slow motion. The confusion turned to panic, then to a white-hot, frantic rage that he had to suppress because we were in public. He turned to me, his eyes wide. Alexis? Why would you put Alexis in charge of the jewelry trust? Because she's family, Matthew, I said, tilting my head innocently. And since she's living with us and raising the children. I thought it was only fair she had a say in their future. Matthew's jaw tightened so hard I thought his teeth might crack. He was trapped. He couldn't shout at me for giving control to his mistress because, officially, he wasn't supposed to care that much. But he knew that Alexis was volatile. And he knew that if the money was tied to her name, he couldn't move it to the woman on 82nd Street. I need to make a call, Matthew hissed. He stood up and walked into the hallway. I looked at Elias. Did you record the heartbeat? I asked. Elias tapped the small, high-tech briefcase on his desk. Got his pulse rate, his vocal stress levels, and the GPS ping from his phone when he tried to access the private account just now. He's panicking, Mrs. Sterling. He's going to make a move. Good, I said. I want him to run. I want him to run right into the trap. When we got back to the apartment, Matthew went straight to the guest suite. He didn't even knock. I followed him, standing just outside the door in the shadows of the hallway. What the hell were you thinking? Matthew's voice was a low, vicious snarl. What? Alexis's voice was shaky. Matthew, you're hurting my arm. The jewelry trust, Alexis. Why did you sign those papers Mary gave you? Do you have any idea what you've done? That money was supposed to be liquid. It was supposed to be ours. You said the money was for the kids. Alexis cried. Mary said this would protect Leo. Why are you so angry if the money is still in the family? Because it's not in my control anymore. Matthew roared. Then, I heard it. The sound of a slap, sharp, final. I felt a surge of cold, dark adrenaline. He had finally crossed the line. He wasn't just a liar anymore. He was a liability. I stepped into the doorway. Matthew froze. Alexis was on the bed, clutching her cheek, her eyes wide with terror. I didn't look at her. I looked at Matthew. Is there a problem? I asked. My voice was a whisper, but it filled the room like a scream. Matthew tried to fix his face. He tried to pull the mask back on, but it was slipping. It was dripping off him like wax. She tripped, Mary, he stammered. I was just trying to catch her. I walked over to Alexis. I looked at the red mark on her face. Then I looked back at my husband. You know, Matthew, I said, I've been thinking about what you said. About family sticking together. And I've realized. You're right. We should all know everything. No more secrets. I pulled a second phone out of my pocket. I turned the screen toward them both. I think it's time we talk about the woman on 82nd Street. And the dog. What was his name again? Justice? Matthew's face changed. Alexis stopped crying. She stared at the screen, at the video of Matthew kissing the other woman. Matthew? Alexis whispered, her voice cracking. Who is that? I tucked the phone away and smiled. That, I said, is the reason none of us are going to sleep tonight. Matthew, why don't you tell Alexis where all the liquid money really went? The air in the room felt like it had been sucked out by a vacuum. Matthew stood in the center of the guest suite, surrounded by the remnants of his 2 lives, looking at the third life on my phone screen. For a man who made his living in the high-stakes world of New York litigation, he looked remarkably small. He looked like a cornered rat realizing the maze was designed to crush him. Alexis stood up slowly. She wasn't clutching her cheek anymore. The shock of the slap had been replaced by a feral, desperate kind of rage, the kind only a woman who has sacrificed her soul for a lie can feel. "Who is she, Matthew?" Alexis whispered. It wasn't a question. It was an indictment. "Alexis, listen to me," Matthew started, his hands reaching out, still trying to use that smooth, manipulative tone. "Who is she?" Alexis screamed. She grabbed a crystal vase from the nightstand, a housewarming gift I'd bought her, and hurled it. It missed his head by an inch, shattering against the doorframe right next to me. I didn't even flinch. I felt like a spectator at a play I had spent years writing. "She's a colleague," Matthew finally shouted back, his mask completely gone now. His face was twisted, ugly. "She's someone who doesn't demand something from me every 5 minutes. Someone who doesn't hide in a guest suite and cry about her fragility while she drains my bank account." I watched Alexis's face. That comment. That was the killing blow for whatever love she had left for him. She realized that to Matthew, she wasn't the true love he had been waiting for. She was just another bill, another complication. "Your bank account?" I stepped forward, my voice cutting through their screaming like a razor. "You mean my bank account, Matthew? The one you've been funneling money out of to pay for that brownstone? To pay for her justice dog?" Matthew turned on me, his eyes dark with a desperate malice. "You think you're so smart, Mary? You think you've won because you caught me in a photo? You have nothing. The transfers are signed. The money is in a blind trust. Even if you divorce me, half of what's left is mine, and by the time the lawyers are done, there won't be anything left for you to take." I let him finish. I let him puff out his chest and try to regain his footing. "That's the thing about blind trusts, Matthew," I said. "They only work if the person who sets them up is the legal owner of the assets. But since you used my digital identity to sign those authorizations, and since I've already filed a report for identity theft with the district attorney, that blind trust isn't yours. It's evidence." Matthew's knees actually buckled. He grabbed the edge of the dresser to keep from falling. You wouldn't," he stammered. "That would ruin the firm. It would ruin us." "There is no us, Matthew," I said, walking closer until I could smell the sweat of his fear. "There's only me. And there's the sister you hit. And then there's the children you've used as pawns." I turned to Alexis. She was shaking, her eyes darting between me and Matthew. She was a cornered animal, but I knew exactly how to make her bite. "Alexis," I said, my voice softening just enough to sound like a sister again. "He hit you. He's been stealing from our parents' legacy to fund another woman. He's going to leave you with 2 children and no way to pay for them. Unless what?" Alexis choked out. "Unless you go to the police right now, and tell them that he forced you to sign those trust documents. Tell them he's been emotionally and physically abusive. Tell them the truth about the embezzlement. I thank you for watching, unless you go to the police right now, and tell them the truth about the embezzlement." I can't," she whispered, looking at Matthew. "He doesn't love you, Alexis." I snapped, the anger finally boiling over. "Look at the screen. He's already replaced you. If you stay with him, you go down with him. If you come with me, I'll make sure you and the boys are taken care of. I'll make sure he's the only one who loses everything." Matthew lunged for the phone in my hand. "Give me that." But he was slow. He was panicked. I stepped back, and before he could reach me, Alexis moved. She didn't just move, she attacked. She threw herself at him, her nails scratching at his face, her weight knocking him off balance. "You liar!" she shrieked. "You pathetic, lying coward." I walked out of the room and closed the door, muffling the sounds of their destruction. I walked into the kitchen and sat down. I picked up my glass of wine, the same one I'd been holding when this all started. It was room temperature now. Stale. I took a sip. It was a small victory. I had turned them on each other. I had taken away Matthew's control and Alexis's delusions. But as the sound of sirens began to wail in the distance, the ones I had called 5 minutes ago, I realized that the hardest part was still coming. I had to be the one to tell the world. I had to stand in the wreckage of my life and smile for the cameras while the man I thought I loved was led away in handcuffs. Did you see his face? The moment he realized the doormat had a spine of cold, hard steel. If you're the kind of person who cheers when a bully finally gets what's coming to them, then hit that subscribe button right now. Don't let the Matthews of the world think they can walk over us forever. And if you're sitting there feeling sorry for him, get in the comments and tell me why. Tell me why a man who hits his pregnant mistress and steals from his wife deserves a single second of your sympathy. I dare you to defend him. The police arrived 10 minutes later. Matthew was led out of the building in a suit that cost more than most people make in a year, his wrists bound in cold steel. He didn't look at me. He kept his head down, trying to shield his face from the neighbors who were already recording on their phones. Alexis was sitting on the stairs, wrapped in a blanket, being questioned by a female officer. She looked small. Broken. I stood on the balcony of my penthouse, looking out over the New York skyline. The lights were beautiful. Cold and distant. I had won the first battle. Matthew was in a cell. Alexis was under my thumb. But as I looked down at the street, I saw a familiar car. A black sedan. The woman from 82nd Street was sitting in the back. She was on her phone. And she was looking right up at my window. She didn't look like a mistress who had lost her lover. She looked like a predator who had just seen a bigger prize. She held up a folder to the window, just for a second. It was a copy of my marriage contract. Matthew wasn't the only one with a plan. And the other woman wasn't just a lawyer. She was his partner in a game I didn't even know we were playing. I watched that black sedan pull away from the curb, its taillights bleeding into the New York rain like fresh wounds. The woman, the third woman, hadn't just left a folder for me to see. She had left a message. She didn't look like a woman who had lost her meal ticket. She looked like a woman who had just finished her first course. I turned back to the apartment. The police were gone. The silence was louder than the sirens had ever been. Alexis was still huddled on the sofa, her face puffy, looking at me with a mixture of fear and forced loyalty. "Mary?" she whispered. "What do we do now? We have to get the money back, right? Before his firm freezes everything." I didn't answer her. I went to my laptop. I didn't open the bank accounts. I opened the background check I had run on the woman from 82nd Street. Her name was Claire Vance, a high-powered fixer for some of the shadiest developers in the city. But it was the date on her employment contract that made my blood run cold. She didn't meet Matthew 14 months ago. She met him 6 years ago. The realization hit me like a physical blow. Matthew hadn't started a second life with Alexis and then a third with Claire. It was the other way around. Matthew and Claire had been a team since before I even met him. The marriage, the perfect husband act, even the affair with my sister. It wasn't just about sex or ego. It was an orchestrated long con. "Alexis," I said, my voice sounding like it was coming from miles away. "When you first met Matthew at that gallery opening, who introduced you?" Alexis blinked, confused. "I told you. It was a mutual friend." "Why? Was it a woman, tall, blonde, wore a Cartier watch on her right wrist?" Alexis's face went pale. "Yes. How did you know?" "She said she was Matthew's cousin. She said he was lonely and needed someone vibrant in his life." Claire Vance. She hadn't just been his mistress. She had been his recruiter. They didn't just want my money. They wanted to destroy my credibility so completely that I'd be ruled unstable, allowing Matthew to take full control of the family estate without a fight. Alexis wasn't just a mistress. She was the bait used to make me look like the jealous, hysterical wife. I stood in the center of my living room, the city lights reflecting off the glass like a million cold eyes. I was surrounded by traitors. My husband was a con artist. My sister was his unwitting accomplice. And the woman outside was the architect. Most people would break here. Most people would call a lawyer and pray for a settlement. But you don't grow up in the Sterling family without learning how to play the shark. If they wanted to treat my life like a game of chess, fine. But they forgot one thing. I own the board. "Alexis," I said, turning to her. "Get up. Stop crying. You want to keep your son? You want to make sure that baby in your womb has a future." Alexis wiped her nose, looking up with wide, desperate eyes. "Yes, anything." "Then you're going to be my ghost," I said. "Matthew is in a holding cell. He's going to call Claire. He thinks she's his exit strategy. But Claire doesn't know that I know who she is. To her, I'm still the grieving, blindsided wife." I spent the next 6 hours in a state of cold, manic precision. I didn't just need to stop the money from moving. I needed to move it first. I called Sarah, my forensic accountant. Sarah, I said, the Lexington Assets account. Who is the secondary beneficiary? It's a shell company, Mary. But wait. I just found a subclause. If the primary owner Matthew is charged with a felony involving the source of the funds, the assets are automatically frozen and diverted to a protective trust for his dependents. His dependents, I repeated. And who does the law recognize as his dependents right now? The children, Mary, Leo, and the unborn one. And who is the legal guardian of those children? Alexis. I looked at my sister. She was a mess. She was selfish. She was a traitor. But she was the key. Claire Vance wanted that money. She had spent 6 years grooming Matthew to steal it for her. But the law has a funny way of protecting the innocent children. We're going to do a malicious compliance, Alexis, I whispered. I'm going to help you sue Matthew for every penny he has. I'm going to provide the evidence of his infidelity, his abuse, and his theft. We're going to use his greed to put the money in your name. But, you hate me, Alexis stammered. Why would you give the money to me? Because, Alexis, you're going to sign a management agreement. You get the title. You get the house. But I control the flow. You'll be the face of the victory, but I will be the hand that holds the leash. And Claire? Claire is going to watch the fortune she spent 6 years chasing disappear into a trust she can never touch. The plan was dangerous. It required me to stay married to a man I loathed just long enough to ensure his conviction. It required me to live with the sister who slept with my husband. But as I looked at the folder Claire had held up the copy of my marriage contract, I realized she had missed one detail. The infidelity clause. It didn't just give me a divorce. In my family's specific trust, an infidelity clause triggered a total divestment. If the husband cheated, he didn't just lose his share, he became legally responsible for returning every cent of the dowry, plus interest. Matthew didn't just owe me my money back. He owed me money he didn't even have yet. I sat down at the kitchen table and opened a bottle of 1945 scotch. It was my father's. I poured a glass for myself and one for Alexis. To family, I said, my voice echoing in the empty, expensive room. Alexis took a shaky sip. What's the first step? She asked. I looked at my phone. A text had just come in. He's out on bail. See you soon, Mary. I smiled into my glass. The first step, I said, is letting Matthew think he's won. Let him come home. Let him think he's still the king. Because tomorrow morning, I'm calling a press conference. And I'm not just going to announce a divorce. I'm going to announce that Matthew Sterling has generously donated his entire personal fortune to a foundation for victims of financial abuse. A foundation that I chair. I watched the digital clock on the oven. 2:14 a.m. In the other room, I could hear Alexis sobbing into her pillow. It was a pathetic sound, the sound of someone who had just realized the love of her life had been using her as a human shield. But I didn't have the luxury of tears. I had a 4-hour window before the banks opened. I sat at the desk in the library, the one Matthew used to use for his private client meetings. I opened the bottom drawer, the one with the false back. I pulled out a small, encrypted hard drive. I'd been preparing for a rainy day since our 5th anniversary. When I first noticed a $5,000 discrepancy in our travel expenses, I thought it was just a midlife crisis then. I was so wrong. It was a down payment on my destruction. Sarah, I whispered into the phone. My forensic accountant picked up on the first ring. She knew the stakes. I'm seeing the movement, Mary. Sarah's voice was clipped, professional. Claire Vance just initiated a transfer from the Lexington account. They're trying to move the $200K to an offshore account in the Caymans. If that money hits that bank, it's gone. We'll never see it again. Can we freeze it? I asked, my grip tightening on the edge of the desk. Not legally. Not without a court order that will take 48 hours. But we can redirect it. Explain. Matthew used your digital signature to authorize his transfers. But he was lazy. He used the same parent company ID for all his shell corporations. If I use your admin credentials to flag the Lexington account as fraudulent identity theft, the system will automatically reroute the pending transfer to the recovery escrow associated with your primary escrow, the estate. Do it, I said. And Sarah? Don't just flag the $200K, flag everything. Every account that has touched his name or Claire's name in the last 6 years. I hung up the phone. Now came the hard part. The psychological warfare. I walked into the guest suite. Alexis was sitting up now, her eyes red and raw. She looked at me with a terrifying kind of hope. "Did you find the money?" she whispered. "I found it," I said, sitting on the edge of the bed. "But you need to understand something, Alexis. That money isn't for you. It's for the children. And if you want to make sure Claire Vance doesn't take your kids away from you to use them as leverage against Matthew, you're going to do exactly what I say." "Claire would do that?" Alexis asked, her voice trembling. "She's a fixer, Alexis. To her, your children are just unresolved liabilities. She'll have child protective services at this door by noon if she thinks it'll distract the police from her embezzlement." I was lying, of course. Claire wouldn't touch the kids, they were too much work. But I needed Alexis terrified. I needed her to view me as her only savior. "What do I do?" Alexis asked. "You're going to call Matthew's office. You're going to leave a message saying you're leaving him and taking the money he gave you. You're going to make him think you've turned on him and that you are the one running away with the Lexington funds." "But I don't have the funds." "He doesn't know that. I've already rerouted them. But if he thinks you have them, he'll go after you. He'll go to the safe house on 82nd Street to meet Claire and plan his next move. And that's where the police will be waiting." The plan was simple. I was using Alexis as the bait to lure Matthew and Claire into the same room. Under New York law, conspiracy to commit grand larceny is a much harder charge to beat when the co-conspirators are caught in a private residence with a suitcase full of evidence, which I was currently preparing. I spent the next hour packing a bag, not with clothes. I packed it with every gift Matthew had ever given Alexis. The jewelry, the designer bags, and tucked into the side pocket, I placed the final bill, a detailed invoice of every dollar of my inheritance he had spent on her, printed on the firm's official letterhead. 4 a.m. The apartment was cold. I stood by the window, watching the street. A black town car pulled up. Matthew was out on bail. I saw him step out of the car. He looked disheveled, but he still had that arrogant tilt to his head. He thought he was coming home to a wife he could gaslight and a mistress he could bribe. I turned to Alexis. "He's here," I whispered. "Go to the kitchen. Act like you're packing his things. Tell him you know about Claire, and that you've already moved the money." "Mary, I'm scared," she whispered. I grabbed her by the shoulders. I looked her dead in the eyes that had looked at my husband in my bed. "Be scared later," I snapped. "Right now, be an actress. It's the only thing you've ever been good at." I slipped into the pantry as the front door opened. I heard Matthew's footsteps, heavy, confident, echoing on the hardwood. "Mary? Alexis?" He called out, his voice smooth and fake. "I'm home. Let's talk about this like adults." I held my breath, my finger hovering over the record button on my phone. "Welcome home, Matthew. I hope you like the welcoming committee." I watched through the slats of the pantry door. Matthew looked different. The bail hearing had stripped away some of his Manhattan polish. His hair was messy, his jaw unshaven. But his eyes, they were scanning the room like a predator looking for a way out of a burning forest. "Alexis?" He called out again. His voice wasn't warm anymore. It was sharp. It was demanding. Alexis walked into the kitchen. She was holding a suitcase, the one I had packed with the final bill. Her hands were shaking so hard I thought she'd drop it, but she held on. "I'm here, Matthew," she said. Her voice was thin, but it held. Matthew walked toward her, ignoring the mess on the floor from the night before. He didn't ask if she was okay. He didn't ask about the baby. He reached for her arm. "Where is Mary? And more importantly, where is the access code for the Lexington recovery account?" "Sarah at the office says the funds were diverted. Mary is out." Alexis lied, her voice gaining strength from her fear. "And the money?" "I moved it, Matthew. I moved it to an account you can't touch. Just like you moved our future to that woman on 82nd Street. Matthew stopped. He let out a low, guttural laugh that made the hair on the back of my neck stand up. "You moved it." He stepped closer, cornering her against the kitchen island. "Alexis, you can barely manage your own Instagram password. You didn't move anything. Mary moved it, didn't she? She's playing you, you idiot. She's using you to get to me." "No," Alexis snapped. "She showed me the videos, Matthew. I saw you with Claire. I saw the brownstone. You were never going to take me with you. You were going to leave me here to take the fall for the embezzlement. Matthew's face contorted. The charming husband was gone. In his place was a man who had lost his empire and was looking for someone to bleed. So what if I was, he hissed. You were a mistress, Alexis. You were a fun distraction who happened to get pregnant. Twice. Did you really think I was going to trade a partner like Claire for a girl who cries when she breaks a nail? I felt a pang of phantom pain for my sister. Even now, knowing what she had done to me, hearing him say it out loud, it was brutal. It was the sound of a dream dying in the dirt. Get out, Alexis whispered. Not without that code, Matthew said. He grabbed the suitcase from her hand and threw it across the room. It burst open. Jewelry, silk scarves, and the printed invoices scattered across the floor. He looked down at the papers. He frowned, picking up the final bill I had printed. What is this? He muttered. He started reading. His face went from angry to confused, to absolutely terrified. This isn't just an invoice, he whispered. This is a confession. He looked up at the ceiling, then at the smoke detector where my camera was hidden. He realized it all at once. He realized I wasn't out. Mary, he roared. I know you're listening. You think this is clever? You think you can pin this on me? Look at the signature on page 4. I stepped out of the pantry, my phone in my hand, recording. I'm right here, Matthew, I said. You're a fool, he sneered, though his voice was trembling. Check your own records, Mary. That third woman you saw? Claire? She didn't just work for me. She worked for your father. She's been on the Sterling payroll for 20 years. My heart skipped a beat. What are you talking about? Your father knew you were too soft to run the estate, Matthew said, a cruel smile stretching across his face. He hired Claire to manage your interests. She's the one who suggested I marry you. She's the one who authorized every single transfer. If I go down for embezzlement, Mary, the entire Sterling family legacy goes down for racketeering. Your father's name? It'll be dragged through the mud of every courthouse in New York. I felt the world tilt. My father? The man I idolized? He had set this up? But then I looked at Matthew. He was too smug. He was too desperate for this to be the whole truth. Nice try, Matthew, I said, my voice steadying. My father was many things, but he was a perfectionist. He wouldn't have left a paper trail this messy. You're lying. You're trying to scare me into dropping the charges. Am I? Matthew reached into his pocket and pulled out a key, an old brass key. This is for a safe deposit box at the bank on 5th and 52nd. The box is in your father's name. Claire has the second key. Go ahead, Mary. Open it. See the truth about the man you thought was a saint. He tossed the key onto the marble island. It slid across the stone, stopping right in front of me. If you call the police now, Matthew whispered, you aren't just sending me to jail. You're destroying the only thing you have left of your parents. So, what's it going to be, Mary? Justice? Or the Sterling name? I looked at the key. I looked at my sister. And for the first time, I didn't know if I was the hunter or the one in the cage. I stared at that key. It looked like a piece of history, heavy and tarnished, resting between me and the man who had destroyed my life. Matthew stood there, his chest heaving, a flicker of his old arrogance returning to his eyes. He thought he'd found my weak spot. He thought the Sterling name was the one thing I wouldn't sacrifice. He was right about one thing. I loved my father. I spent my whole life trying to be the daughter he deserved. But Matthew forgot who taught me how to read a contract. He forgot who taught me that a name is only worth the integrity behind it. Pick it up, Mary, Matthew urged, his voice dropping to that manipulative, honeyed tone. Go to the bank. See the documents. Then we can talk about how to make this disappear. Claire and I. We can fix this. We can put the money back. No one has to know. I looked up from the key. I didn't look at Matthew. I looked at Alexis. She was staring at me, her face pale, waiting to see if I was going to fold. If I folded, she was nothing more than a discarded mistress again. If I folded, her children were just collateral damage in a corporate cover-up. Alexis, I said softly. Take Leo. Go to the bedroom. Lock the door. Mary, Matthew started, stepping forward. Now. I snapped. Alexis didn't hesitate. She scrambled away, the sound of her frantic footsteps fading down the hallway. I heard the click of the lock. I picked up the key. It was cold in my palm. "You think this is my father's ghost, Matthew?" I asked, walking closer to him. "You think he hired Claire to manage me?" Maybe he did. Maybe he knew I'd need a lesson in how to spot a snake. But if there's one thing a Sterling never does, it's pay a ransom. I pulled my phone out. I called Sarah. "Sarah," I said, my eyes locked on Matthew's. "The safe deposit box at 5th and 52nd. Box number 402. I need you to contact the bank's legal department. Tell them I'm the primary beneficiary, and I'm reporting an unauthorized access attempt by a disbarred associate. I want that box seized and delivered to the district attorney's office, unopened." Matthew's face didn't just drop, it shattered. "Mary, you idiot. If the DA opens that, the Sterling reputation is dead. Everything your father built. If my father built a house of cards, Matthew, then it deserves to fall," I whispered. "But I think you're lying. I think you found that key in his old desk after he died. I think you and Claire have been trying to figure out how to open that box for years, and you're hoping I have the second half of the authorization. You aren't protecting my legacy, Matthew. You're trying to use me to finish your heist. You're not a partner. You're a parasite." I stepped back and pressed a button on my home security panel. The panic alarm didn't scream. Instead, every door in the apartment, reinforced steel with electronic deadbolts, slammed shut and locked. The penthouse became a cage. Matthew lunged for the security panel, but I had already deactivated the keypad. He was trapped in the kitchen with the remnants of his final bill scattered around his feet like confetti. "Open the door, Mary," he screamed. He looked wild now, the Manhattan lawyer replaced by a cornered animal. "Claire is outside. She has the contracts. She'll ruin you before the sun comes up." "Let her try," I said, walking toward the balcony doors. I stepped outside into the cold morning air, locking the glass door behind me. I looked down at the street. The black sedan was still there. Claire Vance was leaning against the hood, a cigarette in her hand, looking up at the penthouse. She knew something had gone wrong. I pulled out my phone and dialed the number from 82nd Street. She picked up on the first ring. "He's trapped, Claire," I said, my voice calm over the wind. "The police are 3 minutes away. And the safe deposit box? It's on its way to the DA. If there's dirt on my father in there, you're going down as his accomplice. If there isn't, you're just a common thief who got caught." Claire didn't say a word for a long time. Then, I heard the sound of her car door opening. "You're a lot like him, Mary," she finally whispered. "More than you think. He always said you were the only one with the stomach to do what was necessary." She hung up. The sedan didn't speed away. It stayed there. She wasn't running. She was waiting. And as the first blue and red lights began to reflect off the glass buildings in the distance, I realized the execution hadn't just begun for Matthew. It was beginning for all of us. Because the box, I knew what was in the box. And it wasn't a secret about the past. It was a secret about me. I stood on the balcony, separated from my husband by an inch of tempered glass and 10 years of lies. I could see his mouth moving. He was screaming, pleading, cursing. But I couldn't hear him. The silence of the New York skyline felt like the only honest thing left in my world. I looked at the phone in my hand. I looked at the black car downstairs. Claire Vance was still there, a ghost in the shadows. I realized then that I wasn't just fighting Matthew or my sister. I was fighting a system that had decided who I was before I even had a choice. I tapped the glass. Matthew stopped pounding. He leaned his forehead against the pane, looking at me with eyes that were no longer human. They were desperate. Vicious. "I loved you, Mary," he mouthed through the glass. I shook my head. "No, Matthew. You loved the idea of a Sterling. You loved the access. You loved the silence you thought you could buy with my name." I walked back to the glass door and unlocked it. I stepped back inside. The heat of the kitchen hit me, along with the smell of Matthew's panic. He didn't lunge for me this time. He knew it was over. The distant wail of sirens was turning into a roar right outside our building. "What was in the box, Mary?" he whispered, his voice cracked and hollow. "If you know. Why did you send it to the DA? You've just signed your own death warrant." "I sent it to the DA because I'm not my father," I said. My heart was breaking, but my voice was a blade. He lived a life of secrets because he was afraid of losing what he built. I'm not afraid of losing this apartment, Matthew. I'm not afraid of being poor. I'm only afraid of becoming like you. The bedroom door opened. Alexis stood there, holding Leo. Her face was a mask of terror, but she looked at Matthew with a coldness that surprised me. Is it true? She asked. Did you tell Claire to manage me too? Was I just a checkbox on a list? Matthew didn't even look at her. He was staring at me. The box doesn't have dirt on your father, Mary. Matthew said, a sudden, twisted smile appearing on his face. It has the real birth certificate. The one from the hospital in Switzerland. The one that proves you aren't a sterling at all. The world stopped. I felt the air leave the room. What? Your father couldn't have children, Mary. He and your mother. They were desperate. They bought you. Claire was the one who handled the transaction. You're the daughter of a runaway from Geneva. If that box reaches the DA, you lose the trust. You lose the name. You lose everything. I looked at Alexis. She was staring at me, her mouth open. If I wasn't a sterling, she wasn't either. We were both just part of the play. You're lying, I whispered. Ask Claire, Matthew sneered. Why do you think she stayed downstairs? She's waiting for the moment the authorities confirm the fraud. She's going to claim the estate as the executor for the Sterling Foundation. You'll be on the street by dinner time. I looked at the brass key on the counter. My father's key. The man who raised me. The man who taught me how to ride a bike, how to read a balance sheet, how to look people in the eye. Whether I shared his DNA didn't matter. He was my father, and he had left me that key not to hide the truth but to give me the power to face it. I don't care, Matthew, I said. His smile vanished. You don't care? You'll be a nobody. You'll have nothing. I'll have the truth, I said. And I'll have the satisfaction of watching you go to prison for stealing from a woman who isn't even a sterling. Which makes your embezzlement a federal crime, doesn't it? Defrauding a private citizen is much harder to beat than a family dispute. The front door burst open. The police flooded the room, their boots loud on the marble. Matthew Sterling? You're under arrest. They tackled him to the floor. He didn't fight. He just looked at me, his face twisted in a mask of pure hatred. You've destroyed us both, Mary. He screamed as they pulled him up. You've killed the name. I didn't answer. I watched them lead him out. I watched the elevator doors close on the man I had loved for a decade. I turned to Alexis. She was shaking, clutching Leo so tight he started to cry. Mary. If it's true. What happens to us? She sobbed. I walked over to her. I took Leo from her arms and kissed his forehead. We do what we've always done, Alexis, I said. We survive. But this time, we do it without the lies. I walked to the window. The black sedan was gone. Claire Vance had disappeared into the New York morning. But there was a new car. A plain, white van. A man in a suit got out. He looked up at my balcony and held up a badge. He wasn't the police. He was with the Federal Bureau of Investigation. Matthew was right about one thing. The box changed everything. But he was wrong about what was inside. I thought the departure of the police would bring silence. I thought that once Matthew was in the back of that cruiser, the walls would stop closing in. But as I watched the man from the white van enter the lobby on the security monitor, I realized the police were just the cleanup crew. The real Storm was wearing a charcoal suit and carrying a briefcase that probably cost more than my first car. Mary? Alexis's voice was small, trembling. She was standing by the nursery door. Who is that? Why aren't they leaving? Stay in the room, Alexis, I said. My voice was a dead calm. And keep the door locked. No matter what you hear. I opened the front door before he could even knock. The man was in his 50s, graying at the temples, with eyes that looked like they had seen every dark corner of this city. He didn't smile. He didn't offer a hand. Mrs. Sterling. I'm Special Agent Miller. FBI. He stepped into the foyer without waiting for an invitation. He looked around at the shattered glass, the scattered jewelry, and the final bills still lying on the floor. You've had a busy morning, he said. I understand you've sent a safe deposit box to the district attorney's office. I did, I said, leaning against the marble archway. It contains evidence of my husband's financial crimes. Is that what you think is in there? Miller turned to me, his expression unreadable. Because according to Claire Vance, who is currently in federal custody, That box contains the ledger for a money laundering operation that has been funding half the political campaigns in this state for 20 years. An operation started by your father. And continued by you. The floor felt like it was falling away. That's a lie, I breathed. I didn't know anything about. I just found out about the embezzlement months ago. Ignorance isn't a defense when your signature is on the wire transfers, Mary, Miller said. He opened his briefcase and pulled out a stack of documents. Matthew didn't just use your identity. He used your consent. We have emails, Mary. Emails from your account, authorizing the movement of funds into sterling charities. Funds that were then kicked back to shell companies owned by Claire Vance. I looked at the papers. They were real. The headers, the timestamps, the tone of the writing, it looked exactly like me. Matthew hadn't just been cheating on me. He had been framing me for the last 6 years. Every time I thought I was signing a tax document or authorizing a household expense, I was signing my own confession. He had turned me into the mastermind of his and Claire's empire. If that box reaches the DA, Miller continued, it's not just Matthew who goes to prison. You'll be indicted as a co-conspirator. You'll lose your home, your assets, and likely your freedom. Claire is already cutting a deal. She's naming you as the head of the snake. I felt a cold sweat break across my forehead. I looked toward the bedroom where Alexis and Leo were. If I went down, who would protect them? If I went down, Matthew would win from behind bars, knowing he had taken me with him. Why are you telling me this? I asked, my voice shaking. If you have the evidence, why aren't I in handcuffs? Miller looked at me for a long beat. Because Claire Vance is a liar. And because I think Matthew Sterling is a coward who hid behind his wife. I don't want the head of the snake, Mary. I want the people who actually built the machine. I want Claire's bosses. What do you want from me? I want you to stop that delivery. I want you to get that box back before the DA opens it. And then, I want you to go to 82nd Street. Not as a victim. As the boss, I want you to meet the man Claire was really working for. I stood in the silence of my ruined home. I had a choice. I could let the delivery happen, trust in the truth, and risk spending 20 years in a cell while my sister and her children ended up on the street. Or I could do the one thing I promised I'd never do. I could become the Sterling my father wanted me to be. I could step into the shadow. How much time do I have? I asked. Miller checked his watch. The courier is at the courthouse steps in 20 minutes. If you want to stop him, you need to move now. I grabbed my coat. I didn't look back. I didn't say goodbye to Alexis. I walked out of the penthouse, and for the first time in my life, I wasn't Mary the wife, or Mary the sister. I was Mary the Sterling, and I was going to burn 82nd Street to the ground. As I stepped into the elevator, my phone buzzed. A message from an unknown number. Don't stop the courier, Mary. He's not going to the DA. He's coming to me. The voice in my head recognized the style of the text immediately. It wasn't Matthew. It wasn't Claire. It was my father's old lawyer. The man who had been missing for 3 years. The message on my phone screen felt like a ghost reaching out from the grave. Don't stop the courier. Arthur Vance. My father's lead counsel and Claire's uncle. He had disappeared the day after my father's funeral, leaving behind a trail of empty bank accounts and a pile of unfiled paperwork. Everyone thought he had fled to the islands with the remnants of the sterling cash. But as I stepped out into the lobby, the cold Manhattan air hitting my face like a slap, I realized Arthur hadn't fled. He had been waiting. Mrs. Sterling? Your car is waiting, the doorman said, his voice trembling. He had seen the police. He had seen the FBI. He knew the Queen was falling. Change of plans, Jean, I said, stepping past the black car Special Agent Miller had arranged. I'm walking. I ran. Toward a small, nondescript coffee shop 3 blocks away. I knew Arthur. He was a man of habit. He loved the smell of roasted beans and the anonymity of a crowd. I found him in the back corner, wearing a coat that looked older than I was. He didn't look like a high-powered attorney. He looked like a man who had spent 3 years living in the shadows of his own conscience. Mary, he said, not looking up from his cup. You look just like your mother when she was angry. Beautiful, but dangerous. Where is the box, Arthur? I sat down across from him, my hands balled into fists under the table. And don't tell me you're trying to protect me. Matthew says I'm not even a Sterling. Miller says I'm a money launderer. Everyone has a story about who I am. I want the truth. Arthur finally looked at me. His eyes were watery, filled with a deep, ancient grief. Matthew lied to you about the birth certificate, Mary. You are a sterling. Your father loved you more than life itself. But he was a man trapped by his own power. He didn't build a money laundering machine for greed. He built it for insurance. Insurance for what? For you, Arthur whispered. Your father knew the people he worked with. He knew that one day, the firm would try to swallow you whole. The ledger in that box. It isn't a list of your crimes. It's a list of theirs. Every politician, every judge, every fixer like my niece Claire, their dirty secrets are in that box. Your father didn't leave you a fortune. He left you a nuclear option. I felt a shiver run down my spine. The box wasn't a trap for me. It was a cage for them. Matthew had tried to steal it because he thought it was his ticket to freedom. Claire wanted it to erase her own name from the list. Then why did Miller say I'm a suspect? I asked. Because Miller is on the list, Mary, Arthur said, his voice turning cold. Why do you think he wanted you to stop the courier? He doesn't want that box reaching the DA. He wants to intercept it so he can burn the pages with his name on them. I looked out the window. The white van was still a block away, idling. They were watching me, waiting for me to lead them to the courier. I wasn't a criminal. I was the only person left who held the keys to the city's corruption. Where is the courier now? I asked. He's not at the courthouse, Arthur said, sliding a small slip of paper across the table. He's at the New York Public Library. 3rd floor. The reading room. He's waiting for a signal. What signal? Arthur reached into his pocket and pulled out a small, silver whistle, the one my father used to call the dogs at our summer house. Blow this, Arthur said. He'll hand you the box. But Mary, once you take it, you can't go back. You'll have the power to destroy them all, but they will never stop hunting you. I took the whistle. It felt heavy. Heavier than the brass key. Heavier than the diamond on my finger. I've been hunted my whole life, Arthur. I said, standing up, by a husband who didn't love me and a sister who didn't respect me. I think it's time the hunters became the prey. I walked out of the coffee shop. I didn't look at the white van. I walked straight toward the library, my heart drumming a war march in my chest. I climbed the stone steps, past the marble lions. I felt like I was walking into a cathedral of knowledge, a place where the truth actually mattered. I reached the 3rd floor. The reading room was silent, filled with the smell of old paper and the scratching of pens. I saw him, a young man in a courier uniform, sitting at a table with a heavy locked briefcase chained to his wrist. I took a deep breath. I raised the silver whistle to my lips. But before I could blow it, a hand grabbed my arm, a cold, firm grip. I turned. It was Alexis. She was pale, her eyes darting around the room. She wasn't holding Leo. She was holding a gun. I'm sorry, Mary, she breathed. But they have him. They have Leo. They told me if I didn't get the box, I'd never see my son again. I looked down at the gun in my sister's hand. It was small, elegant, almost, but the barrel looked like a bottomless pit. Alexis was shaking so violently that the metal clicked against the marble table. Her eyes were no longer those of the sister I knew. They were the eyes of a mother who had been pushed past the edge of sanity. They have him, Mary, she choked out, the woman from the sedan. She came to the back service entrance. She took Leo. She said if I didn't bring her the box by the time the sun hit the library lions, I'd be picking him up from the morgue. I didn't move. I didn't look at the courier. I looked at the sister who had betrayed me once for lust, and was now betraying me again for survival. Alexis, I said, my voice as steady as a heartbeat. Who told you I was here? Who told you about the library? She hesitated. Special Agent Miller, he said. He said you were the one who put Leo in danger. He said you were choosing a box of papers over your own blood. Miller. He was good. He was playing us against each other, using the one thing he knew I still cared about, my family's safety, to get me to hand over the ledger. He wanted to keep his hands clean while we tore each other apart in the reading room. He lied to you, Alexis, I said. I stepped forward, closing the gap until the barrel of the gun was pressed against my own ribs. If you give them that box, they'll kill us all. We're the only witnesses left to a 20-year crime spree. Do you really think they'll let a 3-year-old go just because you were helpful? I don't have a choice, she shrieked. A librarian hissed for silence. You do, I said. You can trust the man who took your son, or you can trust the sister who raised him. I didn't wait for her to pull the trigger. I reached into my pocket and blew the silver whistle. The sound was piercing, a high-frequency shrill that cut through the silence of the library like a physical blow. The courier stood up instantly. He didn't look at the gun. He didn't look at the screaming librarians. He looked at me. He reached into his jacket, pulled out a key, and unlocked the briefcase. Mary Sterling? He asked. Yes, I said. He handed me the ledger. It wasn't a digital drive. It was a physical book, bound in cracked black leather. My father's handwriting was visible on the spine. Mary, give it to me. Alexis sobbed, the gun wavering. No, I said. I turned to the courier. There's a white van outside. Special Agent Miller. Go down there. Tell him I have the box and I'm ready to negotiate. Tell him to bring Leo to the fountain in Bryant Park. Now. The courier nodded and vanished into the stacks. I turned back to my sister. I reached out and gently took the gun from her hand. She didn't fight me. She collapsed into a chair, her face buried in her hands. You're going to get him back, Alexis, I whispered, tucking the gun into my waistband. But we're doing this my way. I opened the ledger. I flipped to the very last page. It wasn't a list of names. It was a map of a vault beneath our summer house in the Hamptons. And tucked into the flap was a photo. A photo of my father, Arthur Vance, and Special Agent Miller. They were all standing on a boat, laughing. Dated 12 years ago. But Miller wasn't the boss. He was the junior. The man in the center of the photo, the one with his arm around my father, was the current district attorney. The system wasn't broken. It was working exactly as it was designed to. And I was about to throw a wrench into the gears. I led Alexis out of the library and down to the park. The fountain was spraying a fine mist into the air. The white van was there. Miller was standing by the door, his hand on his holster. Next to him, holding Leo's hand, was Claire Vance. Leo saw us and started to cry. Auntie Mary. Mommy. Stay back, Alexis, I warned. I walked toward them, the black ledger held high in my hand. You've been a very difficult woman to track, Mary, Miller said, his voice echoing off the stone. The box. Give it to me, and the boy goes to his mother. I saw the photo, Miller, I said. I saw your face on the boat. I know the DA is the one who authorized the Sterling Charities kickbacks. Miller's face went stone cold. Then you know that if you don't give me that book, no one in this park is walking away. I have a dozen snipers on the surrounding roofs. I'll call it a domestic tragedy, a grieving wife who went mad. I smiled. It was the smile of a woman who had already lost everything and had nothing left to fear. I'm sure you will, I said. But what you don't know is that I didn't bring the real ledger. I brought a copy. The original is currently being live-streamed to every major news outlet in the country by Arthur Vance. I held up my phone. The screen showed the ledger pages turning, one by one, on a public broadcast. You have 30 seconds to give me my nephew, Miller, I whispered. Before the FBI, the real FBI, sees your name on page 42. You can kill me, but you can't kill the internet. Miller looked at the van. He looked at the phone. He looked at the hundreds of people in the park who were now looking at their phones as the notification went viral. Claire Vance let go of Leo's hand. She didn't wait for Miller. She turned and started to run toward the subway. Justice is coming, Miller, I said. And it's a lot louder than a silver whistle. The world didn't end with a bang. It ended with the sound of 1,000 cell phones buzzing at once. I watched Miller's face, that mask of government authority, crumble into the expression of a frightened little boy. He didn't reach for his gun. He couldn't. Not with 100 tourists holding up their cameras, capturing the moment the hero agent was exposed as a common thug. Leo ran. He ran with that clumsy, beautiful toddler gait straight into Alexis's arms. I watched them collapse onto the grass together, a huddle of tears and shaking limbs. In that moment, the money didn't matter. The Sterling name didn't matter. The years of betrayal felt like a fever dream that had finally broken. I looked at Miller. He was still standing there, frozen. Go, I said. My voice was quiet, almost gentle. The real agents will be here in minutes. You might have enough time to say goodbye to your family. Which is more than you gave me. He didn't say a word. He just turned and walked into the crowd, disappearing into the gray New York mist. He was a ghost before he even reached the sidewalk. 2 weeks later, the New York apartment was empty. The Italian leather sofas were gone. The hand-painted wallpaper in the guest suite was being scraped off by a crew of men in overalls. The Sterling Empire was being liquidated to pay back the thousands of people my father, Matthew, and the DA had defrauded over the decades. I sat on a single packing crate in the middle of the living room. Alexis was in the kitchen, packing a box of Leo's toys. We hadn't talked much about the affair. We hadn't talked about the second pregnancy which, as it turned out, Alexis had lost during the stress of the library standoff. There was a lot of pain between us, a canyon of hurt that might never fully close. But for the first time in our lives, we weren't competing for the same man's attention or the same father's approval. We were just sisters. Mary? Alexis walked in, holding a small stuffed bear. The movers are asking about the safe in the office. Do you want the documents inside? Burn them, I said. All of them. I don't want anything in my new life that requires a passcode. Matthew sent me a letter from the detention center. He tried to tell me he was forced into the conspiracy. He tried to tell me he still loved me. I didn't even finish reading it. I used the paper to light a candle, then watched it turn to ash in the sink. He was facing 30 years. Claire Vance had disappeared, likely to a country with no extradition treaty and a very high cost of living. But she was looking over her shoulder now. That was enough for me. I walked over to the window and looked out at the city. New York looked the same, bright, busy, uncaring. But I was different. I used to think my value was tied to the diamond on my finger and the name on my mailbox. I thought being the perfect Mary was the only way to be loved. I realized now that the perfect Mary was a character in a play written by men who wanted to keep me quiet. I wasn't a Sterling. I wasn't a victim. I was just a woman who had walked through the fire and realized the fire couldn't touch her soul. I moved to a small cottage in upstate New York. It has 2 bedrooms, a kitchen that smells like pine, and a backyard where Leo can run until his legs get tired. There are no cameras here. No secret ledgers. No fixers waiting in black sedans. Alexis lives 3 houses down. We aren't best friends. Not yet. Maybe not ever. But we have Sunday dinner. We talk about the garden. We talk about the future. Yesterday, I received a small package in the mail. No return address. Inside was a single, silver whistle. I knew it was from Arthur Vance. A reminder that while the machine had been dismantled, the world is still full of hunters. But I'm not afraid anymore. Matthew thought I was a doormat. Alexis thought I was a martyr. My father thought I was a legacy. They were all wrong. I am the storm that cleared the air. If you're listening to this because someone you love has betrayed you, if you're sitting in the dark wondering how you'll ever breathe again, listen to me. Don't scream, don't beg, don't break. Become the architect of your own escape. Document the lies, track the greed. Wait for the moment they think they've won and then, show them exactly what a nurturing woman is capable of when she has nothing left to lose. My name is Mary. I used to be a wife. I used to be a socialite. I used to be a victim. Now? I'm just free. And to Matthew, wherever he is sitting in that cold cell tonight, I hope the silence is deafening. I hope every time he closes his eyes, he sees the face of the woman he thought he could break. Because the perfect Mary didn't die. She just stopped pretending. The story is over, but the lesson remains. Loyalty is a gift, and if you give it to the wrong person, it becomes a weapon they use against you. If you've stayed with me, it's because you know the truth. Karma isn't a coincidence, it's a consequence. Subscribe right now to join a community that values the truth over the mask. And if you're still not convinced, if you're one of the ones who would have stayed silent, enter the comments section and lament. Tell us why you're afraid to stand up. We'll be here, waiting for you to find your voice.